In this video, I'm going to explain why a destructive deflationary event where asset prices crash and the dollar gains strength is the biggest concern, not only for investors, but everyone right now. So why is it that deflation is the main concern when everyone else is talking about inflation? Well, there are a lot of components that go into this, but it's really not that complicated. As I've talked about in previous videos, economies go through expansions and contractions. And during those expansions, there is a lot of money circulating because the economy is doing well. And so people are going out and buying things, and money is changing hands very quickly. And this leads to higher prices. So when the economy is booming like this and employment is high and risks seem pretty low, people are more willing to invest money in the market, or they're willing to borrow more money and take out loans. And this action is actually what creates inflation, because most of the currency in our system comes from the banking system. So as credit expands, as more people take out loans and borrow money, this brings in new money from the banking system into the real economy. This then expands the currency supply and thus creates inflation, because now there's more currency units that are chasing the same amount of goods and services. On the flip side, when an economy enters a recession and there's less circulation of money going on in the system, this results in companies and businesses making less revenue and therefore less profit. In order for these businesses to stay afloat in this kind of environment, they have to cut costs. And this oftentimes results in these businesses laying off a lot of their workers, which increases unemployment. When you have this kind of high unemployment and inferred risk in the economy, it makes people less prone to seek out bank loans and to get further into debt, because people become more risk averse. During economic periods like this, more people are trying to pay off their existing debt rather than to get further into debt. And as far as productive bank loans go for like small businesses trying to enter the market, more times than not, people are not trying to start a small business during the heat of a recession. You'd be much better off to try to start a small business as a recession ends and the economy starts recovering. Because if you try to start during the heat of a recession, you're entering a period of time where you have a lot of risk, and you also are fighting the fact that aggregate demand for all goods and services is down, because people aren't spending money because they're trying to hold on to it in order to get through that recessionary period. Also, it's so important to look at it from the bank's perspective, because banks are businesses. Banks are not nonprofits. Banks are for profit. And so if a bank is having to decide whether or not to give someone a loan, a big factor in that is the macroeconomic environment. Is there a lot of risk in the environment? Because they might end up declining someone with a pretty decent credit if there is a higher overall risk of default given the economic conditions at that time. Given all of this and understanding that people become more risk averse during times of economic slowdowns, and also the fact that banks tighten their lending conditions during economic slowdowns, it becomes very apparent why deflation becomes a very valid concern. In case you haven't seen my video about what inflation and deflation actually are, which if you haven't seen it, be sure to check that out. I'll put it in the description or above here or something. Be sure to check that one out. I talk about what deflation actually is. And deflation is a contraction in the supply of money and credit. The fact that during economic slowdowns and periods of high unemployment, people take on less risk and also borrow less money from banks, while at the same time, banks are less willing to loan out money because higher risks of default. This is the perfect illustration of credit contracting in an economy, because banks aren't willing to give out credit and people are less willing to seek it out at the same time. Once we really understand what deflation is and how it impacts businesses and individuals, and then the choices of individuals and individual banks, then we can really understand why deflation is the biggest concern. And it is absolutely crucial to remember that the large majority of currency in our system comes from the banking system. And so if new loans aren't being created, then that means new money is not actually entering the real economy. Now, couple that with the fact that during economic slowdowns, people try to pay off more of their debt rather than to access new debt. Now, you may be thinking, well, as long as the total supply of money is increasing or at least not decreasing, then it's not really deflationary, because the other part of the definition is the contraction of the supply of money. Well, this is a good point. So let's just leave the idea that, okay, during economic slowdowns, the rate of new money entering the system declines because not as many people are seeking out loans and therefore bringing new money into the economy. So that just tells us that during a recession, people start taking out less loans, and therefore the rate of new money entering the system starts to taper off and decline. But that's not technically deflationary. Technically, it's disinflationary, which means the rate of inflation is slowing down, but it's not deflationary. So that leads us to a question. How is it that money is destroyed? How is it that the supply of money can start to actually decline and disappear? Well, if you asked a random guy, how is money destroyed? He'd probably say, well, just give your credit card to your girlfriend and let her do online shopping. That's a quick way to destroy a bunch of money. Well, not technically, actually, because when you're using a credit card, you're actually pulling money from the banking system into the real economy. And so technically that's inflationary, but I had to. The way the money is actually destroyed is when money meets the principal of a debt. And so when that happens, the debt goes away, but also the money goes away. So when you pay off your credit card, for example, let's say you have $1,000 balance and you pay it all off. When that happens, you're eliminating the debt, but you're also eliminating $1,000 from the total supply of money. Therefore, if the amount of debt being paid off exceeds the amount of new credit entering the system, then the supply of money will decline. And that right there is the reason that the contraction of credit leads to the reduction or contraction in the supply of money. And that is deflation. Given the fact that credit is contracting right now, we are in a recession, consumer spending is down, and the savings rate is way above average, why is it even a debate that we are in a deflationary environment? There's only one reason, and that is the Federal Reserve. The way I see it is that there is an ongoing war between deflation and the Federal Reserve. And the question is, who will come out on top? Can the Federal Reserve defeat the natural force of deflation and print our way out of it? Why does the Federal Reserve want inflation so badly? And how do they go about trying to get it? And what does this mean to you? I'm going to answer all these questions and more in my next video and the videos following that. And I'll also cover how we can put ourselves in a position to thrive in a deflationary environment. And once these videos are uploaded, they'll pop up around my face over here at the end of this video, and I'll try to compile some of these into a playlist so they're all organized and you can kind of follow a logical progression of thought. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.